family, we have 10 brothers and sisters. 10 brothers and sisters all together. So 12 in a family.
Where do you fall?
I am number 6. I remember that you introduced that you are number 7, right? So I'm number 6 in the family. I had 3 younger brothers and my younger sister as well.
And your dad decided that there was no future for the children in Vietnam. So I believe, like, when did he decided to build his own fishing boat so that you guys would be able to flee the country?
Yeah, so actually he arranged 3 escapes. So the first one was to, just like you mentioned earlier, in most trips you have to pay gold to buy a seat on a boat. But that trip was just a scam, because they just say, oh, I had a boat that you pay the money to buy your seat. But then there was no boat, and my parents lost a lot of their gold that way. And then we couldn't report that to the government, because we would become criminal as well. And the second escape trip was my father decided to build his own boat. And it took 3 years for everything until the beginning to the end, till the day I escaped Vietnam. With the 6 of us all together, we were on the boat.
Yeah, and she does share a little bit of this in her book and also on our podcast, that her father had to also run the boat down the Mekong Delta as a business in order to hide that they had other intentions for the boat. And Jolie, so when you had left the country, it was with your siblings, and I think, were you 17 at the time?
Yeah, I was 17 when I left Vietnam. Yes, yeah.
Oh,
actually, I was almost 16 when I left. I was almost 17 when I left Vietnam. I stayed in the camp for 14 months, and I arrived in Canada when I was 18, I think. Yeah, I stayed in the camp for 14 months before I came to Canada.
yeah, and how old were your other siblings that left with you?
Oh, I think my oldest brother at that time, he would be 25, 26, 25. I have to count. So many of us, I must count. Okay, if I'm 17, he's 25. He's 25. Yes. And then 25, 23, 20, 25, 23, 23, 21, 19, 17, and like 14. Yeah.
And you guys, so you were at the camp for 14 months because nobody really was able to sponsor that many people from one family with, and you guys wanted to stick together because you didn't want to get separated. And also you were grown children, so I think that made it more complicated as well. But you were finally sponsored to Canada. Can you share a little bit about the people that sponsored you?
Yes, yeah. So they changed our life. The day they put our name on the piece of paper to sponsor us is the day that they gave us a country and a future. So Judy Smith and John Smith, they founded the charity called Hamilton Mountain Fund to help Vietnamese the boat people. And the pastor of one of the church sent our names to John Smith and asked if you could sponsor this 6 children, other 4 families. So then he decided to say yes, and we were able to migrate to Canada. But before that, we were denied by Australian delegation, the American and the Canadian delegation also refused to accept us as well until we got the private sponsorship.
Yeah, and Julie, I had mentioned earlier that in the United States, because of America's involvement in the Vietnam War, there was actually a lot of mixed emotions around Vietnamese refugees. I remember growing up with a lot of kindness around me of other people accepting our family, helping us out, giving us, secondhand clothing and food. But I also remember feeling discriminated. I remember as a child being told to go back to my country or being called a communist. So I don't know in Canada, when you finally came to Canada, what that assimilation was like for the Vietnamese community.
Honestly, when I first arrived at the airport, I found like I was embraced by the Canadians. People at the charity member of the church was so kind to us. They treated like children, and they got us housing. They helped us with everything. And then I got into school. I went to a school full of Canadians. So we were the first Vietnamese student at that school. And the teacher, the guidance counselor was so kind. I experienced subtle discrimination. Perhaps I didn't pay attention at that time. All we did was just concentrate on study. If anything happens around it, I don't think I remember a lot, but not until later. Not until later when I'm older, when I embrace the culture, the different culture, and I kind of realized that I had been through that, but I never realized it, or I ignored it.
I always find it interesting to ask the question for the Vietnamese that ended up in Australia, for example, or somewhere else. Is sometimes it gets complicated because of the United States involvement in the war. The experience of like the refugees in America is there's like a layer of complexity to it because of the mixed emotions. I want to just talk about your book a little bit because in 1985, your dad and mom then decided, I'm sorry, is it 1983 or 85?
1985. 1983 was the year that I escaped.
Yes. So why don't you tell us about 1985?
Yeah, so in 1985, my father, my mother, my two younger brothers, and my younger sister decided to escape Vietnam. And my father didn't make it. My father died. My younger sister died, and my mom and my two younger brother got put into prisons in Coulson Island.
And your sister was how old at the time?
Lang Phu, my younger sister, she was 9 years old.
She was 9 years old. Yeah, and I can only imagine how hard it was for you when you heard the news. But your book, Three Funerals for My Father, you talk about your life in Vietnam through your dad's perspective and your own voice. And you talk about as an adult, kind of reliving that heartache of knowing that you had lost your dad and your younger sister while they were trying to escape. Let me just kind of begin. I know the journey of sharing your story has been a long one for you. So can you just share with the audience, why you chose to write a book and what that journey has been like?
Yeah, so I always questioned why my father took make a decision to escape. Because we already sent the sponsorship paper back to him, but I knew that he was under investigation because he organized the second escape where he had 6 children live in Canada, and a lot of pressure. I lost my father when I was 17 years old. 19 years old, in the circumstances that I could never accept. And also my younger sister, when she was 9 years old, her body was never found. And my father had 3 funerals. Like when you die, you're supposed to be at peace. But for him, it took 3 funerals for him to finally rest. So after his 3rd funeral in US, I decided to write the book Anchorless, because anchorless, to me, anchorless mean that uh, anchor is like a father. My father is the anchor of the family. Anchorless, I lost my father. Anchorless also represent that a drifting stage of a mind, like just like me, like I was like in questions for so many years. I questioned fate, I questioned destiny, I questioned why I lost my father and my younger sister in such a horrific situation. And also anchorless is because the boat that my father escaped in, uh, during chaos, no one pulled up the anchors. So the anchor got dragged a distance and got cut and left behind in the riverbed of Mekong. So people believe that without the anchor, the boat won't be able to make it. So after I wrote Anchorless in my father's voice, in the ghost voice, I make the book very short. Is the voice of a person who already died, a regretful voice and sorrowful voice of a ghost who really want to remain on earth to protect his children, because he left so much undone, he left his responsibility behind. Also with Anchorless, I would like to give my children and my niece and my nephew the answer that they are wondering about their grandfather. I also want to use the ghost voice because I wanted them to hear directly from my, like, seem like they are hearing directly from their grandfather. Like I grew up with my father telling me a lot of stories about the tigers, about his childhood, about how he experienced the war. So I felt that in my heart, and I want my children to feel the same. So I wrote it in his voice. It's like a diary of a ghost. Okay. And Anchorless won a few awards, being recognized by some organization in US, and won prizes. Before I got a phone call from a publisher in Vancouver, BC, Canada, told me that I would like to hear the entire story, Jolie. I don't want just to hear the story about your father. I want to hear your story about yourself, about your escape trip from Vietnam, about how you got to Canada, and what would it like for you growing up and live in Canada and cope with the pain and everything. So then it came 3 funerals for my father. If I could say a little bit, that 3 funerals for my father with one person. If a person dies, only 1 funeral and that's it, right? But my father, in fact, has 3 funerals.
Yes, and can you just share the first funeral, because when his boat capsized, his body got washed ashore.
Yeah. So for some reason, I actually describe in the book that his body was with the fishing boat. The fishing boat were around it to try to rescue the people as well. So his body was on the fishing boat. Lang Phương bodies was never found. And my mom was put in prison along with my 2 younger brothers. Then the warden came to the prison and told my mom to come and recognize his body. So my mom came and recognized like to accept my father's body, and she buried him on the sand on the nearby on the sand by the beach at Koh Seng Island. Uh, on the, and then a year later, she and her nephew came to the island and uh, uh, like I'm sorry, I got a bit emotional, so I forgot the words. So they exhumed his remain at that time, and then buried in Dalat. And then 30 years later, my brothers in US two of my brother, the older brother and the younger brother who survived that escape trip, came to Vietnam, cremated his bone, and then carry his ashes into America and bury together with my mother.
I mean, it, it brings me emotional to hear that because they made the trip because they wanted their parents to be together.
Yes, and also that my father wish fulfill his wish that he wanted to be in America. Yeah, so he was buried in Uson Cemetery in Vietnam in Đà Lạt for like 29 years, and until we decided that we got permission from the government and we planned everything, and then my brother came to Vietnam and had it done.
So what does the fall of Saigon mean to you 47 years later? And then how do you share that feeling and experience with your two children?
I would tell my children this. Yeah, think about all the lives that was lost before the war. Family was separated, people die because of what? Napalm bomb, orange particles. People live with disability for the rest of their life. The after effect of war is horrible. And then after the fall of Saigon, what really happened to the people is human displacement. People have to leave Vietnam and die in the ocean. So we think, to me in my mind, I think of April 30th, 1975 as the time that we should remember all the lives that was lost during the war, all the people who fought for the war, whatever they believe in, but they fought the war and they died, families separated, and those who tried to escape Vietnam to find freedom and die in the ocean, and their voices are actually never heard. And my stories, I hope it's just one of those unheard voices.
Yeah, and I know there's still so much pain. I mean, even my mom hasn't fully healed. I mean, she still gets very emotional when she, not necessarily about the war, but the aftermath of the war. When she talks about what it was like in Vietnam and how hard it was to survive. She gets very emotional. And yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts about the Vietnamese diaspora community today, whether it's in Canada or in the US, and what the view is between North and South, because it is quite controversial still within our.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I'm very glad you asked this question, Tracy. That's how I really admire your work, because I have two teenage. Actually, they are not teen anymore. They told me, "Mom, you even forget our age." So my daughter is 22, and the youngest daughter 20. I raised them in a completely white community. And when they got out of the house to fly untethered, they have to use that. They go to university and live like an hour and a half away from home. And they went to the university where a lot of Vietnamese, Chinese, and international students. And this is what they say: I am one of the child of the Vietnamese, the boat people. And many of them said, "What do you mean, the boat people? I don't hear that. I don't hear. What is it? What is it?" So my daughter came in home and told me, "Mom, not too many people knew about the boat people. Especially the generations of Vietnam born after 1975 in the 80s." And then I was hoping that there's some history recorded in the history of Vietnam that also recorded in Vietnam, but I think it's rarely found those. But then here in Canada, in US, you recorded all the history of the Vietnamese, the boat people. So I think there's a separation of the two. Okay, so I am Vietnamese. I am Vietnamese, the boat people. So that's how my children came home and told me. Um, so I, but And then there is another thing that I would like to mention. It's called intergenerational trauma. So whatever the trauma that the parents endure during the escape, like endure during the why they have to make such a drastic decision to leave Vietnam. And a lot of people saying that you know that you are going in to die in the ocean, so why would you leave? You know, like there's still that out there, but no one understood why we have to make such decision. Because can I share one thing? Okay, because this really touched my heart. A few weeks ago, I saw a footage. I saw a footage, and I wish I had never had to see that. Is the war happened in Ukraine right now, and the mom gave a little bag to the little boy and told the little boy just to leave the city and join the crown, because a lot of people leave the city. And I look at that and I was horrified. I said, how is the little boy going to survive? But the mom had to stay behind because she has to take care of her failing mother. Her mother couldn't move. So that image really, like, I wish I never had to see that, but I was really upset. And I thought back, okay, why my parents let me on that boat and escape Vietnam? Because under circumstances that the parent they have to decide, it's a survival, that you have no end. It's completely like dead end. That's the only way for you to survive, is to go into the dark to find the light. Or you seek death, but you find life in it. You find freedom in it. And freedom is so important. And to survive is so important. And I look at the little boy, I look at that, I was thinking, do we have to wait like 35 years in order to read his story? I hope he's fine. I hope people among the crowd will. I asked my sister, what really happened to this boy now? I know my sister told me that, Julie, there will be adult among the crowd, that they will help him. He will come to a refugee camp, just like we did. We survived and we got to the refugee camp.
Yeah.
So I hope I answered your question, Tracy.
I mean, I think that's why these stories are so important. They're not just historical stories, but these are experiences that people are still living today. I mean, the
Yes,
refugee story is still happening today.
yes,
And so there are very common themes and experiences that, whether or not our stories are from the past, they're still relevant to communities today. And a lot of what we do as an organization is we try to activate our community to what we call pay it forward. Um,
yes.
so we do fundraisers. In fact, we're actually launching a silent auction tomorrow, and proceeds will go to Alight, which is an organization that is currently on the ground in Ukraine, helping with the relief services and stuff. But that's very important part of, I think, the work that we do is, preserving the past, but also figuring out how do we educate, how do we create more awareness of the circumstances and what's happening.
Yeah, can I ask you that? I'm sorry, Tracy. One more last thing, because they need to be educated about the Vietnamese, the boat people. Then, they understand more about their parents, because many parents, they would not tell the story. It's just so hard for them to talk about the suffer that they have to go through. And through this, hopefully there's a connection. There's a
Yes, and
connection. Yeah.
I agree. And I mean, I hope there's healing in that intergenerational trauma. Just on that note, I wanted to make one comment, is that what I find really interesting is when I do talks today with Vietnamese student associations around the United States, there's a mixture of Vietnamese citizens that are coming here to study. So they, were born in Vietnam in the 90s, they're studying. And to them, the Vietnam that exists today is the only Vietnam they know. So they don't have necessarily the trauma that the same generation who's growing up in countries in the US do, because we're being raised by our parents' historical memory of Vietnam, and the children in Vietnam are being raised surrounded what is the current Vietnam. So it's a very interesting dynamic. And it was something that I didn't quite understand at first. And I had met somebody who, she said, she came to Texas University to study, and in her room, she was staying with her aunt, and she hung up the Vietnam flag. The red is the yellow star, because that's her flag.
Yeah.
And said, oh my God, you cannot hang that up here. And took it down. And for her, she didn't understand why. But her aunt was, a Vietnamese American, and she kind of just remembered the Vietnam, what it was like. So we're close to time. I want to thank you, Jolie, so much.
Thank you.
For joining us and sharing your personal experience.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you so much. And I'll have Maurice send around maybe Jolie's link if anybody wanted to explore more of her work. I just wanted to pull up the last part of the slideshow, and I'm hoping it'll work. Here we go. Move forward along here. So I hope after this, you'll just take a moment to listen to some of the stories on our podcast. It's also available on our website, and it's completely free. I wasn't going to play it here because I was concerned of any tech dynamics, but I'm glad that Jolie was able to share with me her firsthand account. I just wanted to share something real quick. So this is a picture of me in Singapore refugee camp. I'm the little one in the red dress. This is Sister Teresa. She worked at a Catholic church nearby, and she volunteered every day at the camp. And so while my mom was out and about trying to make meals at the camp, she took care of my sisters and I. And when I launched the podcast on Facebook, she found me. She lives in New Zealand, and her sister is in the blue, who lives in Singapore. And they flew to New Jersey, and I hosted them at my house. And my mom completely broke down crying. My mom lives in Florida now, so my mom flew up to see them. How old are you? She's 80, and my dad's 84. Yes. And so it was a very special moment and almost surreal, but leave it to social media and Facebook for people to find you across the world. But I wanted to leave you with that because, our stories, we hope that they can bring people together, whether it's physical or emotional. And this is just an example of just something that I would have not dreamed would have happened. But we still keep in touch. She's back in New Zealand now. But we're a whole team. These are some of my great teams. We're predominantly volunteers. So we do this out of just the love and passion. We do a lot of events, both virtual and in person. We have a blog on our website, also free. And those are personal journals and stories that people share of their family's experiences. We also have a recent story slam, but all of the stories that we selected for our story slam is also available on our website. And every year we do an open call, and we encourage Vietnamese Americans and others to basically share their family stories, their diaspora stories, or their Vietnamese American identities, and we select a few to showcase. And you'll see on our website, we showcase their stories. And this is a way for us to create a platform to encourage people to speak up, to find their narrative and not to take pride in it. We also have a kit that's coming out. A lot of my listeners were calling me and saying, how do I get my dad or mom to talk to me? How do I ask grandma? There's language barriers. There's so much trauma, like I don't even know where to begin. So we created this kit. It has a little booklet with some historical context. It has what we call conversation cards in 4 categories, both in English and Vietnamese. And we hope that it makes kind of the whole process of learning about your family's history a little bit more fun, a little less intimidating. We don't want people to feel like, we don't want people to not share in their family these stories because they're afraid to ask the questions. And so this is our way of helping them. And our journeys map, I'd like to end with this, with a short video. This is something that we created with the support of New Jersey Council for the Humanities. It's a digital map on our website where people from all over the world can enter in their family's history with dates and locations of what their migration journey has been like, with recordings, photos, and artifacts. We launched early, I would say mid last year, minimal viable product. So that's called our MVP prototype. And so the video that I'm going to ask Maurice to play in a little bit is just some people who used our platform, and they shared with us what it was like going through that journey of understanding their family stories. So before we go there, here's some ways to get in touch with us. This is my email. Feel free to email me directly if you have any questions or things that you can't find on our website that I can help you with, or other resources that may be out there. And we have a lot of ways to contribute if you are interested, but I always ask our audience one big favor is to share this with other people. This is a public program, it's free, and we're doing it because we want to bring awareness, and we depend on word of mouth and just organically people to share this with their communities. So with that, I'm going to ask Maurice to play our last video of some of our constituents and their journeys in understanding their family's history. I like the screensaver, Maurice.
It's been an incredibly healing journey to understand my parents and my cultural past with more clarity.
Their story is a huge part of my own identity as a second-generation Vietnamese American, and it serves heavily as a reminder of where we all came from and the challenges we went through to get to where we are now.
I think the more first-hand accounts we have, the more we're able to hold on to the actual experiences of the people who went through it.
I also think that it's important that we have this platform where we have the Vietnamese community preserving Vietnamese stories, because it gives us the opportunity to shine light on perspectives that may have not been shared yet. It also gives us as a community an opportunity to reclaim our stories.
When my parents would tell me about their trials and tribulations when I was younger, I couldn't wrap my mind around it because it was so unwieldy and far from the life that I knew as a child.
I just always assumed that people who left Vietnam ended up in Canada, the US, or Australia. And the more I listened and the more I learned, I was just like, wow, no, the diaspora is all over the world. And to see it visually represented on the Journeys map, I think is just really cool.
I also love that the VBP Journeys map is a project of collective history and storytelling. It enables communities and individuals to tell their stories from their own perspective.
And it makes me feel that I'm not alone and that so many other people share similar experiences and upbringings.
As the map grows in presence over time, I really hope that more and more of the stories we tell can reach a greater audience, and that it pertains not only just to American history, but to our world history.
It's very humbling to trace out everyone's story, knowing that we are all looking and searching for the same thing. It really gives it a sense of humanity.
Thank you. So thank you for joining this evening, for learning a little bit more about the Vietnamese diaspora community. And I hope that maybe seeing what we do as an organization will motivate you to go back to your own families and learn more about each other. And if you have kids, to share more so that they have something to pass on to their kids. So thank you again. And thank you, Maurice, for having me at the library. Thank you, everybody, for joining online. I don't know if there's any questions. I know we have a couple minutes.
The nun that you got to meet again, did she remember you specifically as an individual before? Because I imagine she must have taken care of, I don't know, hundreds of kids or something.
So I posted that picture on Facebook when I was promoting our podcast. I joined all of these different, if you go on Facebook, there's tons of Vietnamese people related groups. Just people who still feel so connected to the experience have created these organic groups. So I was joining them, promoting the podcast and saying, hey, if you have a story to share or you want to preserve yours, let us help you. And then I posted that picture and she recognized us.
Well, I figured she recognized herself, but did she recognize?
No, she recognized my sister more than me, actually.
Okay.
Because so my sister used to want to be a nun. And so I know, now she's like not even close. But she's sort of the one, so my older sister was really close to her. And when she saw it, she recognized my sister more than me. Because I was 3 and she said you were kind of like a quiet child. But yeah, so she recognized my sister specifically because they were close.
She's still a nun?
No, she's retired. Both her and her sister have retired.
You're both nuns.
Yes.
How many years was it from the picture, first picture to the second?
Oh, gosh. I want to say 37.
Wow. Wow.
She almost looks the same though, is what I said.
That's pretty good.
Yes. Yes. So I don't know if there's any questions, but yes, so please check out the site. I'm so glad that you guys were able to join, and I appreciate everybody's patience during the technical hiccups. All right, well, good night, everybody online. Thank you again. And then thank you for those who came in person. I really appreciate it.
You live in New Jersey now?
Yes.
Where?
I live in Montclair.
No, really? And where in Virginia?
So I grew up in Fairfax County.
Yeah.
And I still have family there. I still have family there. My brother, my 2 brothers and my sister still live there.
We were in Springfield.
Oh, okay. We were in Springfield for a small amount of time. Yes.
My first sister and brother are still there.
Oh, okay. So I grew up mostly in Fairfax City of Fairfax County, but for a small time we were in Springfield because we were actually sharing a house with my uncle before.
Granite Road?
Yes, yes. But yes, I go back very often. My parents are in Florida now. They said it reminds them of Vietnam.